in progress.
Let's set in a comfortable meditation posture and close the eyes. Put the attention on the silence that's always there deep in the mind. Connect with that silence. Become the silence. You are the silent witness. Now listen to the words of the Yoga Vashishta. Book 5, Chapter 14. Continuing with verse 57. The knowledge that reasoning or the power of thought is distinct from the soul introduces the existence of the unhappy mind. For the sake of true happiness, you must get rid of that separation. When you become conscious of the silent witness in you and permeated throughout all nature, then you will find the thinker and his thinking, the thinkables and their thoughts. These will all vanish into nothing. The thought that I have a soul and a living soul also brings all the miseries to which we are exposed throughout all eternity. Just the thought of separation, the thought of being a separate living being. That brings all the miseries to which we are exposed to. The consciousness that I am the one soul and not a distinct living being. That is called tranquility of the spirit and is true joy. But notice even at that level, we are using our discrimination at a very fine level. The intellect is always there until the end. O Rama, when you are certain that the world is the universal soul, the silent witness itself, you'll find the false distinctions of your mind and individual living soul to be nothing in reality. When you perceive that all this is your very self, and your mind will melt away into the soul as darkness dissolves in sunlight and shadows disappear in the air. As long as you cherish the snake of your mind within yourself, you are in danger of catching its poison. But when the mind is removed through your yoga meditation, by the balancing of all karmic traces, then you escape the danger immediately. Be bold, O Ra, and destroy the mighty demon of the deep-rooted error of your mind. By the power of the mantras of your perfect knowledge. Upon disappearance of the demon of the mind from the dwelling of your body, as when a demon yaksha disappears in the air, you will be free from every disease, danger, care, and fear. Dispassion and detachment, joined with the knowledge of unity, melt down the substance of the mind and confer the best and highest state of joy and rest in the Supreme Spirit, bringing on that state of tranquility, which is the main aim of everybody. May all these blessings attend upon you. Chapter 16, Chapter 15 on greed. Vasishtha continued. The soul, by following the unholy essence of the mind, which is the source of the world, is led to fall into the trap laid by the mind for all living beings. The soul then loses the brightness of its spiritual form and takes the gross shape of the senses. It waits upon the guidance of the mind and indulges its impure imagination. It falls into greed, which is like a poisonous plant. Makes it senseless and spreads a fearful anesthesia over it. Greed, like a dark night, hides the soul under the gloom of oblivion and produces endless pains to the soul. The god Shiva, understood the flame of the Kalpa conflagration, but nobody can withstand the fierce fire of greed. It bears a form as formidable as that of a long, sharp, and black dagger. Cold in appearance, but very injurious in its effects. Greed is an evergreen plant, bearing bunches of plentiful fruit on high, which, when obtained and tasted, proved to be bitter and gall. Greed is a hungry wolf, prowling in the recess of the heart, feeding unseen on the flesh, blood, and bones of its sheltering body. Greed is like a rainy stream, full of foul and muddy water, overflowing and breaking down its banks. When leaving its dirty bed empty, the man stricken with greed remains stingy and broken-hearted at all times. His spirits are dampened, and his sordid soul is debased before mankind. He is dejected, weeps, and lays himself down in despair. He who does not have this black adder of greed burrowing in the recesses of his heart, as the free play of his vital breath, which is otherwise poisoned by the breath of the viper rankling in his breast. The heart that is not darkened by the gloomy night of greed feels the rays of humanity sparkling in it, like the play of bright moonbeams. The heart that is not eaten up by the corroding cares of greed is like a tree without cankers blooming, with its blossoms of pretty. The current of greed is ever running amidst the wilderness of human desires. With ceaseless torrents and waves and hideous whirlpools and vortices around. The thread of greed, like the long line of a flying kite, whirls and furls and pulls mankind as its toys and playthings. Rude, rough, and hard-hearted greed, like a remorseless axe, breaks and cuts down the tender roots of virtues. Foolish men led by greed fall into the pit of hell. like ignorant deer, enticed by grass, scattered over its cover, fall into the black hole of a trap. Men are not so much blinded by their aged and decaying eyesight as they are blinded by the invisible greed seated in their hearts. The heart which is nestled by the ominous owl of greed is as pitiful as the god Vishnu, who became a dwarf because he begged for a bit of ground from Bali. A divine power has implanted this greed which cannot be satisfied in the heart of man. This greed whirls him about as if tied by a rope, like the sun revolving around its center in the sky. Fly from this greed, which is as heinous as a venomous snake. It is the source of all evils, even of death in this mortal world. Greed blows on men like the wind. Greed makes men stir like stones. Greed makes some as calm as the earth. And greed ransacks the three worlds in its rapid course. This entire parade of men is impelled back and forth by greed, as if pulled by ropes. It's easy to break ropes, but not the bond of greed. Ram, get rid of greed by forsaking your desire. Because the wise have determined that the mind dies away from lack of its desires. Desires arise from karmic traces. They have no other source. Therefore, our only project is to balance karmic traces. We have nothing else to do. By balancing the karmic traces, we are immediately freed from the snake of greed. Never observe the distinctions of my, yours, and his in any of your wishes, but wish for the good of all alike. Never foster any bad desire. The thought of self in what is not the self is the parent of all our grief. When you cease to think the not self as the self, then you are reckoned among the wise. Cut off your egoism, O gentle Ra, and dwell in your unearthly self, the silent witness. Do this by forgetting yourself and by dispelling your fear from all created beings. Chapter 16. 2 ways to abandon greed: reason and insight. Ram said, "Sage, what you are saying about the abandoning of my egoism and greed is too deep for me to understand. Sage, how is it possible to give up my ego without giving up this body and everything that is related to it?" Egoism is the chief support of the body, like a post supports a thatched house. The body will surely perish without its egoism. Its durability will be cut short. Like a tree is felled by sawing on its trunk. Now tell me, O most eloquent sage, how can I live by giving up my egoism, which is myself? Answer me according to your right judgment. Vasishta replied, O lotus-eyed and respectful Ram, the wise who are well acquainted with the subject say, there are 2 ways to abandon desires. One is called the knowledgeable, based on knowledge or direct realization, and the other is called the thinkable, based on contemplation and reason. Now let us continue. Sitting with eyes closed, as the silent witness, we'll introduce the practice of Trimana Sanyama on the esoteric Mahamantra. And watch how this practice dissolves and balances all the karmic traces that have been touched upon and enlivened by today's reading of the Yoga Vasishta. Take her depth.